Northeast Valley Health Corporation in sunny San Fernando, California. I would like to welcome you to the Jedi Podcast. I'm Reginald Austin. In this inaugural episode, we will take on a discussion about the relatively recent rise in hate speech. This is not a new topic. In fact, it has been with us throughout the course of human history. This then leads us to the question of why do we feel compelled to talk about it today? The answer to that question can easily be discovered through a quick internet search or a check of the news, where you would find musings about this hate speech throughout the worlds of entertainment and sport. This Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion podcast features two esteemed guests, the first of which is NEVHC's Paula Golden, and the other is Andy Socker, who is the program manager of Southern California's Jewish Vocational Service and executive and creative director of The Lavender Effect. We would like to thank you for joining us for our discussion of this important issue. Our show gets underway shortly with a conversation with Paula Golden. Stay with us.
Hello everyone, it's Brittany, the Jedi Educator here at NEVHC, and I would like to remind you that our 25th annual toy drive is near. To make this year more memorable, we're hosting 2 events where we'll provide patient families with toys, grocery store gift cards, and pictures with Santa. We encourage you to get involved to help make this year's events merrier and brighter. Some ways that you can help are shopping NEVHC's Amazon wish list, bringing in a new unwrapped toy. You can contact our development department for event volunteer opportunities, or you can donate online at nevhc.org/Toy Drive 2022.
Welcome back to the Jedi Podcast, where today we're talking about hate speech. I would like to welcome our first guest, NEVHC's Paula Golden. Welcome, Paula, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity to join this conversation.
Before we start, can you give us a little background about yourself and tell us how you are connected to the topic of hate speech?
I'm an African-American woman, born and grew up in Los Angeles, California. I attended Catholic school while living within a culturally diverse community. Prior to moving to the San Fernando Valley and working at NEVHC, I worked with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference of Greater Los Angeles in the 80s. So SCLC did a lot of work in the community. They were an organization fighting injustices, racism, and they had programs centered around education and crisis. These are prevalent today, and we live in a country where hate of Black exists 24/7. I'm connected with this topic because it shares the topic of mental illness. I have a family member with mental illness. I can personally say that that member has no control over their actions, the voices they hear, what they say or do, or the ability to discern the information rushing in their thoughts. Some mentally ill gravitate to politics, religion, and other topics, including hate. And it's mainly to provoke a reaction without realizing the damage. So, you can have a person that's got depression, schizophrenia, mood swings, psychosis, paranoia, realities, and all this. When you mix it up and they throw in what's going on today, hate, well, you've got an explosion.
So a curious thing has happened with our current conversation about hate speech, in that the recent spike seems to have been inspired by icons of entertainment and sport. And my question is, does the recent source of hate speech skew how seriously we are to take this discriminatory and contemptuous thought processes going on, as well as the opinions that are advanced by these individuals?
Well, I'd say all hate speech is taken seriously. It should be taken seriously. And we've got a worldwide internet, we've got media access, and if we don't take it seriously, every society is affected and there's consequences. For, say, Kanye West's hate speech, it's magnified because he's an African-American male. He's an icon in the music industry. He's got mental illness and millions of followers. So in my opinion, instead of seeking help from him, he's become used, to my opinion, by the media because you've got money, you've got influence, you've got ratings, and we need to look past the celebrity and look at what's going on. That's my opinion.
Okay.
I only hope that it would take time, people would take time and become responsible enough to learn about mental illness and who are the hate groups, where they are, and the impact these hate groups have on influencing individuals, especially those with mental illness.
But then this comes to the question of how can we, are we to dispatch the comments that he's made? How much of that do you think can be attributed to the fact that he has been diagnosed?
Personally, I think a lot. We can't, you can't say no, hold him totally responsible. He has some responsibility too, because that's part of mental illness too. I feel like the people that are his entourage, the people that he works with, the people that are feeding him the feeds, that's messes with your psyche. I mean, as a mental person, if you're not on your meds, your mind goes rampage. I mean, I feel empathy toward him. He doesn't get a pass, but I do hold those are responsible that are around him, because they've known he's had mental illness, and he has the funds to get help. Just reminds me of things that happened in the past with other things in other situations. You're getting paid by this person for you to step up and say, hey, you need some help. Can I come help you? But also, because I have, again, a family member with mental health, he's an adult and he can refuse. And that's a schism. It's huge, because for my son, my family member, he can say no anytime.
How concerned should we be about the effect that these individuals with such an outsized influence have on our public discourse?
Huge. It's like I said, it's a ticking time bomb, because he's got a voice that reaches across the globe. He's got a microphone. He's got, and people he's an influencer. So just think, anything he says, for some people, they don't even have to do the research. They're like, oh, it's the spoken word, And when you have that type of voice, it could be destructive.
So we've gotten a bit specific talking about the contribution that mental illness could have in these conversations about hate speech. But if we move away from that and move back into a more general conversation, there was also recent controversy from the world of sport, and specifically we're talking about basketball. And we had speech that actually was in the same realm with respect to anti-Semitism. How are we to treat that? Because in that case, we get to distill out the contribution that mental illness may be making to these choices that people are making. How are we to sort of look at that as it comes into these, the broader conversation about hate speech?
I would say that any icon, sport, entertainment, when they have a voice, and like I said, a voice that reaches over the globe, it's a negative. Anti-Semitic hate in general, it just is a pathway to somebody doing an act, and that's what you don't want. You want to shut it down really quick. And again, the media, they have to stop, and they have to get educated, and they have to stop the feed. At some point, if many times we've had politicians, even, sports, whatever, and they've started saying something that was hateful or something that was derogatory, and no one knows to shut the mic off. Because the more that you give that person a voice, the louder it is.
And so it seems also that this is amplified with the usage of things like social media platforms, because this is actually what he did. He ended up tweeting or retweeting support for a movie that was blatantly anti-Semitic. So that was part of it too. So yeah. It sounds like you're saying that there needs to be greater responsibility as well there in trying to stamp out this kind of
absolutely
contemptuous speech. Up until this point, we've discussed hate speech in slightly more general terms. We've also given it some specificity with respect to talking about the contribution of mental illness. When we return, we will go to an interview with Andy Socker for a more detailed conversation of how hate speech affects those who belong to groups that are routinely targeted. Stay with us. NEVHC's JEDI internship program is in search of candidates for the 2023 spring term. The program provides students with a semester-long training in the key concepts of JEDI, data collection and usage, communications, policy review, and more. Students who complete the program will receive a $1,000 stipend and course credit at their respective college or university. For more information about the Jedi Internship Program or to recommend a candidate, contact me at area code 818-898-1388 extension 42003 or email me at reginaldaustin@nevhc.org. Welcome back to the Jedi Podcast, where today we're taking on a discussion about the recent escalation in hate speech. We're now joined by a second featured guest. This is Andy Salker. Welcome, Andy.
Thank you for having me.
You have a fascinating backstory that I think connects you to this discussion in a unique way. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm a Jewish American. I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, moved to California to work in the entertainment industry in '91. And I'm also a gay American and have been living at the intersection of homophobia and anti-Semitism most of my life.
And that's an interesting thing, because one of the things that we focus on here at NEVHC is this idea of intersectionality and people having these identities where they have privilege and power at the same time. So, for instance, of course, as a white male, you have privilege in this society, but at the same time, you're dealing with oppression as being for belonging to at least two groups that are, traditionally oppressed, in the sense that we're talking about being Jewish and being from the LGBTQIA plus community.
Indeed.
Yeah. So the current reporting on hate speech in the media is coming from a slightly less common source. So what I'm talking about here is from the worlds of entertainment and sport. So my first question here is, how true is the claim that these are uncommon sources of this sort of speech?
Well, I think, when you have a platform, when you have an amplifier for your voice, you can take advantage of that position. That is a privilege unto itself, having a microphone. And what's going on with the entertainment industry, I don't think is uncommon. What's unique about this particular surge of conversation is that it's extremely public, and that broadcast is worldwide because of the internet, because of media today. When I was growing up, there were rumbles of anti-Semitism that I kind of overheard on occasion, but it was never outrageous and loud and in your face the way it is now.
And I think the other part of that conversation is where these beliefs are actually coming from. So one of the other things that we talk about at NEVHC is this idea of disproportional exposure, right? So the idea about beliefs, I think it's poorly understood by many people. You don't really choose what you believe. You believe something because you've been convinced of it by some person, or something has actually convinced you of these beliefs. So when you're looking at these ideas coming from these icons of entertainment and sport, that next question becomes, where are these ideas coming from?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. I think they can come from a variety of places. There are circles of influence where, especially in today's world, where people just live within that circle and they reinforce that belief system of their own based on who they associate with, who they listen to, what podcasts they subscribe to, whatever it might be. And it's constantly reinforced now. And it's much easier to ignore the rest of the conversation today. So I think that's kind of at the root of it, whether it's an entertainment person or somebody, storming the Capitol.
And that's also interesting because many of these old ideas that you're talking about are the ideas that actually that exist within this realm that in which they actually live, and they're being reinforced. Many of those ideas are ancient. They're really, really old. These old tropes about, the way Jewish people think or their behaviors or these sorts of things. However, current reporting has discovered what seems to be a new form of anti-Semitism in which Jewish Americans are being targeted for not loving Israel enough. In fact, there's an exact quote from the spouse of a candidate currently running for office out east, and the spouse said that as a family, this is the right quote, as a family, we so much love Israel. In fact, I'm going to say we probably love Israel more than a lot of Jews do. I have to say that, unquote.
Well, they must be referring to Jews in America or Jews not living in Israel. Yeah, that's kind of a crazy statement because loving Israel, what the subtext of that is Zionism, basically, and whether you believe that Israel is a Jewish state or not, and there's been a lot of controversy about that, and recently, and always has been. I didn't really go to Israel and become aware of what Israel is all about until I went on an excursion called Project Interchange. And this was, I think, in 2013. There were 10 LGBT leaders from across the nation that were selected to go to Israel and talk to Israelis about the conditions in Israel, what Israel really is, everything from artists to politicians. And it changed my point of view about Israel. I actually fell in love with Israel for the first time, truly in love with Israel for the first time, just by going there. So I think, there used to be a tradition where young Jews would go to Israel when they were in high school and stay on a kibbutz and, kind of entrench themselves in the Jewish way of life, typically in high school. And I didn't do that because of my family situation, and I never had that opportunity. So I think that if anybody visits Israel, they'll realize what an amazing place it is. And it's not just Jews that really honor Israel. When I went over with Project Interchange, I was sitting next to a big group of Baptists on the flight from New York, and they were all excited about having their pilgrimage, going to Israel. So there's so many different types of people, so many different religions, so many different belief systems that really love Israel, and some of them have an excursion every year going to Israel. So I think it's easy for us to discount any place on the planet that we don't know.
Mm-hmm. If we could just quickly pivot to the other part of your intersectionality or your identity, and how that actually also fits in this framework of hate speech, and that is being a part of the LGBTQIA plus community. And the question there for me is, do you see that there is some sort of like a compounding effect where these actually are, disadvantaging you in more of a way than just being Jewish or just being LGBTQIA plus?
Well, let me start by saying I have felt anti-Semitism from the queer community and the straight community. So anti-Semitism is not exclusive. Homophobia is also not exclusive to Jews or non-Jews, right? So just because we are in a particular community doesn't mean we share all the same values. It's really kind of strange. A lot of people, especially in the LGBT community, because we are from every cross section of the world, of life, of race, religion, economic status, and so forth. So that is a really diverse group, more so than the Jewish population. So I think I lost the answer to your question there.
I think you were doing just fine, but that's fine. And just one more question here, and that is from your perspective, as we deal with this new rise of anti-Semitism. How are we to address this? I mean, what kinds of things do you think that we can do to sort of push this conversation along to sort of educate people? What do you see as possible?
Well, you said it, education. Most people fear what they don't understand or what they don't know. And, a belief is not fact. So I think the first thing is to separate those two in our minds and say, just because I believe something doesn't mean that it's factual. And we all have to reflect on that. We all have to internalize and think. The other thing is build empathy for all humans. We're not that different from each other, and yet we spend a lot of time focused on our differences. And I feel like, as a gay man, as a Jew, as someone that is kind of exposed to that, I feel more empathy for others because I've felt the oppression. I would hate to see anybody put in a position of any kind of oppression just to be more empathetic. But that does kind of relate to my personal experience and why I try to question my own beliefs on occasion. Maybe I'm not right about something. And in today's world, I think people are so afraid of losing control over their beliefs. They're threatened by change, and that kind of exacerbates this issue.
Yes, and I think you're right. One of the key problems that we have now is that it's very easy to live within the echo chamber and to find things that actually sort of give life, give oxygen to the things that we already believe, and to not really have any selective pressure to go pursue anything beyond that because it's uncomfortable. And people have gotten to the point, it feels like, where they're just comfortable with their beliefs and being associated with people that believe as they do. And I think that's been the real issue here. And so that's how things like these comments that we're seeing coming from the entertainment industry and from the sports world that are, they get to live sort of out there, and they're finding people that want to believe these comments to be true. It has been a truly enlightening experience to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your experience and your perspectives.
My pleasure, and thank you for doing this very important work.
The Jedi Podcast will continue after this. Stay with us.
Join us for our next Jedi Podcast when we welcome special guest Joy Ahrens, Director of WIC, to discuss intersectionality. I'm Jessica Barraza, and together with my co-host, Dr. Austin, we will explore how we experience privilege and disadvantage at the same time. See you there.
Welcome back to the Jedi Podcast, coming to you from Northeast Valley Health Corporation in San Fernando, California. We're continuing our conversation about hate speech with Paula Golden. In our last segment, Andy talked about steps that we could take to address hate speech and move the conversation toward a greater understanding of the fictions that underpin this toxicity that comes with it. Paula, what were your impressions about Andy's comments?
I agree with Andy when he says that education is crucial to understand our neighbors and those who may not look the same, may not share the same culture, gender, or beliefs, nations, cultures, and individuals who have experienced hate, racism, genocide, apartheid. The one thing that unites us is the effort that we know our history, we teach the history, and we don't repeat that history. Hate speech with a megaphone can be powerfully destructive. and the entertainment and sport icons, as well as political officials, have a responsibility to recognize those dangers. I'm grateful I work in a company that takes hate speech seriously and has the Jedi as a vehicle to allow individuals like myself and Andy to voice our perspectives and experiences. I hope this episode opens dialogue and is a path to better understanding of this topic.
Paula, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
We look forward to having you with us again in the near future. I would also like to thank our other featured guest, Andy Socker. This podcast is made possible by NAVHC. Thank you to Brittany Galicia for your creative and technical support, and to our Jedi intern, Alondra Estrada. We hope you will join us next time when we talk to Joy Ahrens about intersectionality. This has been the Jedi Podcast.